chat around for while I'm talking.
I would tend to move the IHI
Where you can
get more about what matters
to Dundee today.
What's it for?
to
Hi,
the individuals and their
I like
families.
the inclusiveness of it. Or inclusivity, is that the
That
word?
was Jason.
That might help about what matters to healthcare
And I
professionals.
think Alan's just come
They
back.
can apply concepts.
My name is Mustafa. I'm actually with
Oh, good. I can't see all the names because they're overlapping.
Just exploring the place. Looks nice.
You ready to rock and roll?
I think so.
Great.
I'd rather do them at 8 o'clock at night for future reference. It's just a personal thing, nothing to do with the content.
From your sofa. That will come in time. Give it another year and a half and we'll suddenly go, why are we spending our lives rushing around in traffic and having miserable time?
Okay, folks, welcome everyone. So we should all be standing in a circle. You may not be able to see, there's a lot of us here today. I'm David Lomas, by the way. I'm one of the Pentacle tutors, and I'm just going to welcome everyone and say a couple of words before I hand over to the real people that you come here to see and to chat to today. Now I know we've probably got a mix of people who are new to Cube and people who practically live on Cube. So I'm going to start from scratch just so that everybody's kind of got the same basic understanding of what we're here. And when you would start a normal conference like this, you would probably stand up in front of everyone and say, can everyone hear me at the back? And of course, this is a silly question because only the people who hear actually respond. But on Cube, we should do the same thing. We should check. Now, of course, nodding your head on Cube when you're wearing a headset probably just means your headset falls off. So we have to find a slightly different way of doing it. And as with everything else, we start to use our fingers instead of our feet, instead of our heads. And so if you can hear me, I'd just like you to nod your head by pressing the Y key, Y for yes. And hopefully you'll see, as people do that, you'll see everyone around the room doing. And of course, if you can't hear me, you can press the N key for no. And then I know that you can in fact just N for no. Okay, so that's good. We can all hear each other now. We thought it might be useful to try and just explain why we're all here. Why are we all standing around wearing brightly coloured suits in a big circle here? And why have we built Cube? In fact? And I was trying to think about how to explain this. Now, there are two really excellent videos that explain all of this, and you'll have a chance to look at them later on. One of them is about 18 minutes long, and it's the TED Talk that Eddie Obeng did on smart failure, explains all about what's happening in the world and why we need a new way of working. That one's really great if you like listening to people, because it's Eddie talking very, very fast. There is another video which is slightly shorter, and there's no talking at all, but there is lots of reading. So if you prefer reading, I suggest you watch the World After Midnight video, but even that one's about 8 or 9 minutes long, and I have about 2 minutes to do the same thing. I was thinking, how on earth can I do this? Well, I'm going to ask you another yes-no question now. Get your fingers ready on the Y and the N keys. Does everybody remember when music used to come on a big black shiny disc? Who remembers that? Yep, okay, lots of nods. Okay, so I mean, back in the early days, this was the only way that you could buy music, and everybody kind of understood it. And then one day in the early 80s, this new thing came along, this new thing called a CD, and it was the future. It was the future of music, and everybody got very excited and thought, well, we've got to be modern and with it. So everybody went out and bought CDs as gifts for people, and they gave them for birthdays and Christmases. And there was one day we realised in the early 80s that there were more copies of Dire Straits' album Brothers in Arms on CD than there were CD players in the UK. Very curious situation. So I had this vision of all these people suddenly getting this new CD out, unwrapping it, and then trying to put it on their record player and trying to figure out where to put the needle, and it was very confusing. But eventually we kind of got past that, and we realised we need a CD player. So this was a change. Oh no, the fire alarm.
Oh
It's
my
all
God.
right, it's just a test. Okay. Just like in real life, we test the
Woke
fire
everyone
alarm
up.
for you as well. Excellent. So this was a big change in music, but it wasn't really a different. It was still, you still got your music on a disc. It was just slightly smaller and silver, and you still needed a big box to play it on. It's just that the thing went inside instead of on top with a needle. You didn't really need a new way of thinking about music, a new operating system for music. It was just a change in the size of the technology. Fast forward to today though, and it's a very different scenario. My wife came to me the other day and she said, my phone has stopped working, I can't get my emails. And it says all my data is gone, my bandwidth is all used up. And I said, well, you've probably been downloading loads of things. And she said, no, I haven't been downloading anything. And when I looked, she'd been out running and she'd been listening to her music. And of course, her music doesn't really exist anymore. It's on the internet. So she'd been streaming all this music while she was out running, not realizing. And she'd used up all her bandwidth and now her phone doesn't work and she can't get to her emails. In order to understand music today, you need a completely different operating model. You need a different software in your head. You need a different operating system because the music is different. The music doesn't really exist. It's out there on the internet somewhere. It's not the same as the difference between vinyl and CD. And this is what we've noticed happening in the world. The pace of change is getting faster. The way to run an organization is changing. The things that you used to do that gave you success don't seem to work anymore. You need a new operating system. And that is why we built Qube. Qube is effectively a new operating system. It's not really software, although there's software in it. It's about enabling people to come together, to learn something, to find a different way of thinking, to collaborate with each other, to share what works, to learn fast, to go faster, no matter where you are in the world. For big, global, complex organizations who are distributed, it's a new operating system for success. And that's the kind of essence of why we created Qube. Now, of course, with any new thing, there's a little bit of a learning curve. You have to get used to it. And so, especially for people who haven't been on Qube very often, or if you have been on for a while, I wanted to give you a very quick overview of what this thing is that you're looking at before we get started. I'm going to zap everybody across the room. Now, in the real world, this would be the equivalent of me grabbing hold of everybody's shoulder and pushing you to the other side of the room. A little bit rude. So apologies in advance, but I'm going to zip us all over to here. Fabulous. And I'm going to ask everyone to click on this yellow triangle up here. I'm going to step forward onto the stage here, and then you might start to get a little bit quiet. But the tutors will help everybody step forward, so you're looking full screen at this picture. Obviously, the main part of Qube is this big 3D space. This is the cubicle that we're meeting in, and everybody can move around in. That looks the same for pretty much everybody. Okay, but there are a few bits around the edge that aren't part of this kind of shared world that we're living in, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of them. One of them is down at the bottom left-hand corner, down in the bottom left-hand corner here. There's a whole bunch of icons, 2 rows of icons down here. The bottom row is really important. This is where all the sound stuff is. So hopefully everybody's found the microphone icon. If you have trouble with your sound, that's where you go. And the row above, these are kind of the usual working icons that you might find in any other kind of application you use to do work. There's things like save and cut and paste and all the usual stuff. We probably won't need too many of those today. When we get onto running real projects, that's where we focus our attention. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, again, there are a few different icons. If you ever get stuck and you're not sure where you are, click the home icon, the one that looks like a little house down here. And that will take you back to this view, and then you've got a view of the whole room, and you'll be able to find your way from there. And obviously sticky notes just on the bottom row there, they're quite important. Last 2 bits before I hand over. This list of people, okay, these are all the people who it won't look like this list, but all the people who are in the session with us today are here. And so you can often tell who's talking by looking for the little speaker icon next to their name. If they've got a red cross, like a lot of people have at the moment, it means their microphone's turned off, so they may not be able to answer you. And you might need to just help them find the microphone icon. If you want to connect with people and you're not sure where they are, these 5 icons here are really helpful. Probably the most useful one for today would be the speech bubble there, the little green speech bubble. If you want to send a private message to someone and get some help from either me or Josh or Toby, if you need some help with something, click that button, find our name in the list, and you send us a message, and we'll respond as quick as we can. And then zooming around, this is quite a big space. Okay, you can get very tired if you have to walk. I know somebody stole my picture. Never mind. Underneath there on the right-hand side, you can probably see on your screen now a list of places, and you'll see we've got a whole bunch of places such as first aid. If you need some help with Qube, if you're getting stuck, we might ask you to go to a first aid spot. There's a spot for our partners, so all the different exhibitions that are available today under our partners, and view presentation. When we go to the big screen to listen to the main speakers, view presentation is where we'll go. So those are shortcuts, and it saves you walking all the way. It'll just zip you straight across there. I'm going to stop at that point, and I think I'm going to ask, is it Simon, are you going to lead us on to the next section?
Yeah, Dave, thank you very much. I'm going to bring up
Simon.
another slide. hopefully it's going to come up. Right. Can everyone see hopes and fears in front of them? So if you, what wants to do today is capture what your greatest hopes for from today's activity and also what your fears are. So my fear on the right is that that everyone can read my writing. So what you do is grab a post-it note, either by clicking on the board with your right click or from the little yellow icon in the bottom right. And
if you want to get closer, click on the yellow triangle above it and then you'll be able to hear clearly. Yeah?
I'll just have it.
Right. Well, there's lots of similarity coming up on the screen there. Lots of good comments.
Helping Simon to read to summarize quickly.
Okay.
Let me just quickly run through the fears because there's a few things here that I think people are a little bit worried about, and it might be useful just to make sure we deal with those so that people can relax and just enjoy the rest of the session. I've tried to organise them a little bit here, but actually there's a lot of similarity. There's a lot of stuff to do with getting lost, not finding your way on Cube. Everyone can remembering how to use Cube, and some stuff about things like connections and bandwidth. So. Obviously, we've got a big group here. We've got a mixed group. You know, we will have connection problems. It's just like a mobile phone. If you get disconnected, you just reconnect, and we'll get you joined in again. If you do get lost, remember send a private message to anyone in the people list who has Pentacle at the end of their name. They're a Pentacle tutor, and they'll be able to help you out. So send a private message to one of us, and we'll get you reconnected and get you joined in. Loads of time explaining the basics. Well, this is pretty much all we're going to do. The rest of the day is the rest of the session is all about the content. So hopefully we'll be able to deal with anyone who is getting stuck and not distract everyone else. So I think most of those are kind of just worrying about the basics on Cube. Everybody's in, hopefully everyone can hear. You'll notice most people have got their microphones turned off. When we're doing the big group sessions, we'll probably ask people just to maybe keep their microphones off, especially if you've got some background noise. It makes it a lot easier for everyone else to hear. And I'm really pleased that somebody's got no fears and is ready to jump in. So Simon, why don't you take us through what we're going to do today based on the hopes?
Well, I was going to say, I think the interesting one is people have picked up about this is a new way of working and learning about a new tool, which hopefully you will do. And you learn by using Cube. That's how I learned it, and I think most people do. So, and you're talking about meeting people. So down here, people talk about meeting new people, and that's one of the fantastic things. The people on Cube, I've never met Tammy, but I feel I know her very well because we keep meeting on Cube. We know how to work together. There's also, I think, a little bit about understanding how it works. And again, I think some people put on the fear side. I think you'll grasp how it works very soon. And then you'll find, like a mobile phone, it does far more than allow you to talk to each other. It allows you to actually communicate and work together. And this is the first time I've ever been to a meeting where I can read all the post-it notes. So I think that's enough from me. And we'll move on to Tammy, I think, now.
Okay, brilliant. Yep. So if everyone can take a seat. So if you go to those that still aren't sitting down, if you click on the View Presentation Zoom In, that will put you into a seat. So I was just it's really great to see you all here. I'm so glad so many of you turned out, and there's quite a lot of new people here, which is really good. But I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes just explaining why we're here and how we've been using Cube to drive change and innovation in healthcare. I work in National Services Scotland. My job is Head of Innovation. And when I started doing this job a couple of years ago, before I started really getting into it, I wanted to find out why we found it so difficult. What is it that stops us being innovative as an organisation and as a health service provider? And common things kept coming up. So it's hard to get people together. It's really difficult when people are busy to get people into a room together to do any thinking around innovation. Despite all of us saying we need to take risks, we really don't like taking risks. It's not comfortable for us in the health service, I don't think. We do lots of learning. We go away and do lots of learning. We're really encouraged to do that, but it's really difficult to apply that in the workforce in a way that's sustainable to make change happen. We have a very kind of strong culture in the health service, and it's really hard to change that. change how we work and think about different ways of working. And finally, we're just really, really busy. Everybody's busy all the time, so it's really hard to stop and think about innovation. And I'd met Eddie at a leadership program and kind of seen QUBE and what that could do, so I thought, let's give it a go. What could QUBE bring to us as a way of working that would really drive that agenda forward? And I quickly discovered that it really, really helped collaborative work, and it really helped bringing people together easily and quickly to start working on things together. We started to develop really good innovative ideas, really good spaces, good tools and models on QUBE to help us do that. We were learning and applying immediately, so everything we learned we were able to apply to our work and demonstrate that to deliver the work quickly, and we were able to share that learning directly with our teams as well. This all led to us starting to change how we behaved. We were starting to work in a really, really different way, a really positive way. In terms of behaviours, and it fitted in with our day job. It didn't feel like an extra add-on, so it was hitting all of those things that we needed it to hit. Here's some of the projects that we've been running on QUBE, and some of the sponsors of these projects are here today, so if you get a chance and you want to ask them questions, please do at the end of the session. As I said, we started in NSS, National Services, with an innovation framework, and Fiona's here today. She led that project. That only took us 8 weeks to do that for the entire organisation by working on QUBE. We've got some innovation projects. We're doing a piece of work with a private company around Fitbits and collecting data from patients who go to the gym as a gym membership, and see if we can align that with national data sets to see if there's anything in there that would help with either the patient self-management of health or decision making. We have the National UTI Network, which has been run by Health Protection Scotland, and we're getting all of the stakeholders onto QUBE to run workshops, so that's working really, really well and really effective. We have a project for improving blood transfusion practice called Right First Time, so that will work across all the health boards and blood banks in Scotland. We have No Delays. Jamie and Aileen are here. This is a Grampian innovation that we're now looking to roll out across other health boards in Scotland. So again, getting people together much easier on QUBE to speed up that rollout. And finally, we've got Kerry and others here from Regional Planning in the North. Their core teamwork on QUBE to work out what their strategies and plans are, and then they bring in core stakeholders to work on their key projects. So that's just a few of the projects, and most of those people are here today if you want to chat with them. So that's brought us to today, QUBEx. This is the first in hopefully a series of events. We thought it'd be really good to try something very, very different to bring people together. Pentacle, the Virtual Business School, are sponsoring it, and it's been partnered by Digital Health Institute, Scottish Enterprise and the Innovation Leads, and they've got stands up in the back left-hand corner which you can visit later and see what they're up to and speak to them. We're hoping to develop an innovation incubator to really help drive innovation forward in healthcare. As part of that, we would run QUBEx series, innovation masterclasses. We'd do some of the open innovation that NHS Leads are involved in with Scottish Enterprise. So there's a lot that we're hoping to do in this. There's lots of projects that are looking to work on QUBE right across Scotland, and again, it really helps people collaborate and deliver those projects at speed. So that's the kind of next step. So as I say, today is the launch of QUBEx. We had a theme or an idea around big data because big data is everywhere and everybody's talking about big data, but we wanted to do it with a bit of difference because there is so much data, we don't really know what to do with it. So we really wanted to start with the patient or the person at the centre of that use of big data. So we've got Professor Jason Leach, who's going to come up and give us a presentation in a minute. And then that's going to be followed by Professor Eddie Obeng, who's going to talk about data everywhere and not a drop of information. So how do we ask the right questions of big data? So on that note, I'm going to finish and invite Jason to join me at the lectern, and we'll kick off with our first presenter.
So I hope people can hear me. I now know you can nod your heads. So if you can hear me, you can nod your heads. I can see you. How interesting. This is a fascinating experience. So the first one is relatively straightforward anyway. The first one is simply a question, and you're going to go away and something mysterious is going to happen. You're going to end up in groups and you're going to be discussing that question. I'm not quite sure the mysterious bit works, but somebody will do that. The premise, and I'm going to talk about it in a little moment or two about what I think person-centered care is, but the first question for you to consider in small groups and pairs and however they're going to distribute you around is, what do you think that expression means? We in Scotland have made a very conscious decision to move away from patient-centered. That's what we used to call this subject. Now we call it person-centered. And my version of person-centered is roughly that we are the visitors in people's lives, not their families. So the whole of the health service is designed to keep families and carers out and patients and workers in. And I think perhaps we've misunderstood that for the hundreds of years we've been doing healthcare. So my version of person-centered care is about bringing patients, families and carers into the conversation, into the rooms. So that's not the end of my talk, you'll be sorry to know. I'm going to do some other slides in a second, but they're going to send you out into groups to consider what that question might mean for you as individuals.
Okay, so what we're going to do, Eddie's going to drag us up into the sky in a minute to give us a bird's eye view, and we want you to go and sit at tables very, very quickly, have a 3 or 4 minute chat at your tables, so you've got about a minute each. What does the term person-centered mean to you? So we want you to, if you point at a table, it will sit you down. If you can sit at tables of 5 when you let go, and
you can click on the little floaty yellow triangle by the table. You don't have to aim directly for a chair. If you see the...
I would say to people, I'm going to start the IHI
Where you
get hold about what matters
What's it found?
to
Hi.
the individuals and their
I like
families.
the inclusiveness of it. Or inclusivity, is that the word?
Was it Jason?
That might talk about what matters in healthcare.
And I think Alan's just done that.
Quite constant.
My name is Mustafa. I'm at your table as well.
Oh,
good. I can't see over there because I'm out on the
So I'm here, is everybody else back?
yes, we're back.
I think we most Jason. Well done.
Oddly, I think we gain people. We gain new people each time we do that.
Do you see more faces?
Doppelganger.
I see Angus Watson, who I think I know, and he's only got half a face on his eye. Maybe he's sitting on Sunday's knee. I'm not sure.
I think there are some people sitting on each other's laps now. That's very...
It's interesting. It's interesting. Now, you should have had conversations there, I hope, about what person-centered care means to you. But let me tell you a story if I can just... Okay, so you should be... So nod your head if you can see a picture of an old lady with me behind her. Okay, so this is Barbara. Barbara is 84. She's in a house in a town called QUBEx, and those of you from Scotland will know that's a relatively poor, working class, post-industrial town between Edinburgh and Glasgow, close to where I lived and was brought up most of my youth. And she's got 4 chronic diseases. She's obese. She lives in this one room in her house. She collapsed and fell over because of her diabetes and her frailty, and she had an 18-day stay in hospital. And it was, in her words, hell on earth. She hated every second of it. They didn't have the right equipment to lift her in and out of a bath, so she had no shower or bath for those 18 days. She had her hair washed once. She didn't have her own environment. She didn't have her own friends. It was just a disaster. So she fell over again. She got out of hospital 18 days later, and a few weeks later she had pretty much a carbon copy event. And this time the ambulance paramedic who you see on the right of this image came to get her. He was the ambulance man sent to recover her. And he didn't take her into hospital, partly because she was stroppy and didn't want to go, for obvious reasons. But the other reason is he is part of our system in Lanarkshire called Hospital at Home. And Hospital at Home looks after people who are properly sick, who are seriously sick. and we keep them in hospital, but we do it at home. So she had an 8-day stay in hospital, but it was in her own house, in her own clothes, in her own kitchen, with her own food, with her own friends who were next door, and we didn't interrupt her social care. So she has 4 social care visits a day, and when she for the hospital stay for 19 days, we had to cancel those social care stays. And any of you who have worked in health or social care know the difficulty of doing both of those things. Stopping and starting social care can become a big, big problem. So that's what I think person-centred care is. The lady in the middle of the image is a care of the elderly consultant. She's one of the most senior doctors in this health board, and she now spends most of her time in people's houses and not in wards. It's better for the patient, it's better for the clinicians, it's cheaper, and the outcomes are better. So we can't do this everywhere because it's an enormous change in systems and design change. It's a bit like moving from a conference centre to QUBE, frankly. It's as radical as that, if not more radical. And we do it in 2 big towns, but we don't do it everywhere. So why is it so difficult to start to think about what that might mean in real terms? Well, we know that the over 75s are going to double by 2050. We know that we can't build a new 500-bed hospital in every town in the country. So we're going to have to do something different. The dependency and illness rate in today's 70-year-olds, unfortunately, is very, very similar to the dependency and illness rate in the 70-year-olds of 30 years ago. There's a common misconception that we're making everybody healthier. Unfortunately, it's not true. The people who are 70 are just as sick, and there are more of them, and the ones who used to be 70 are now 80. So we're better at keeping them alive, but we're not better at fixing them, for lack of a better description. So we're going to have to do something else. This is an IHI model. IHI, many of you will know, is the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, where I had the privilege to work for a little while in America, and they have probably done the most thinking about healthcare design in the world. And they talk about 3 things being necessary: will, ideas, and execution being the biggest challenge of the lot. And Deming, W. Edwards Deming, who came up with much of this type of systems thinking, he talks about the execution box all the time. His obsession was, what method are you going to use to drive that change? So this is what we used to do. This is Deming in 2 slides. And if you're cleverer than me, you can read Deming's original work. I find it quite dense and opaque, but it is clever. So this is Deming in 2 sentences. Deming says, don't design and change in a boardroom. Design and change in the workplace. So come out of the conference rooms, even if you're clever, even if the conference rooms are full of real workers, go to where the work is. So instead of designing whatever your form is, or your fancy thing, or your admission sheet, or whatever it is you want to design for 18 months in a short life working group, move out of there and come into where the actual work happens. It's what the Japanese call gemba, walking to where the work is. And that's for real Deming enthusiasts in the crowd. I've just done him a huge disservice, but that is roughly what Deming's method says. He says you learn and empower the workers rather than learn and empower inside the boardroom. So you move from an industrial era of performance management, of setting targets, of inspection and external motivators to connecting. So you move to an environment where people are working together on the same problem. They are the workers and the leaders in the one room. This happens to be an image of what we call a learning session I've been at. So is this Thursday? I think this is Thursday. So Monday to Wednesday this week, I've been in 3 separate learning events and 900 people where we've done patient safety on Monday. On Tuesday, I was doing early years, which is the first 5 years of life, a huge Scottish multi-agency piece of work around making the first 5 years of life better. And yesterday, we did our newest and most innovative work around raising attainment in primary and high school children. And we did this image. We connected people together. We got them to work on common problems. We got them to share their data openly. And we didn't force them. And we got 700 or 800 people to come along and share that. And we've been doing that attainment work for just over a year. So that has been translated into person-centered care. It's a much more ethereal and difficult to describe thing, but you all know it when you see it. So person-centered care isn't like a healthcare-associated infection. It isn't like a checklist in an operating theatre. But you know compassion and care when you see it, and you know it when your family get it. So we're also trying to use the same methodology, the same technique of using that intrinsic motivation, empowering the people, and using tools and techniques that will drive that change forward. We're trying to do that in person-centered care as much as we do in other places. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that when you come back from the second breakout. That's if the fire alarm doesn't go again. So the question this time, and I think you're going to be taken through a specific exercise by tutors that are going to help you think about this question a little more deeply. But what stops us providing that person-centered care? So what elements of our system or our people or ourselves stop us from providing that person-centered care? Tammy.
Okay, so we're going to go off into small working groups, and what I want you to do, on the screen in front of you, you can see some signs with letters on. I want you to click on the sign with the letter of your surname, and that will take you to a small working group where a tutor will talk you through the exercise we're going to do.
Hi, if you click on your name at the bottom of the screen, you'll go to join another one. Yeah, so click view presentation zoom in, and then you see there's some letters like A to X.
We're trying to get
we
people
just
from
break
there.
So we know how to fix it.
I see a few people, I'm sure it doesn't matter, but a few people are sticking sticky notes on the back of other people's heads. So I'm just going to stick a few...
Okay. Isn't that a game? I thought
oh, sorry, yeah.
you did it with
Not a
cigarette
taking
paper, then
turn,
that's on your forehead, isn't it?
yeah.
Depends what the post-it says, I suppose, really. If it's one of these, it's okay. If it's something different, that's less good.
Yeah, I think it is. So there's a couple up there which might need, if you want to step forward a little bit.
Great, Clive, Captain Pip, Diana.
Yes.
Stop now, makes me a little bit edgy.
But if people wanted to talk about is logistics and geography for the people who put that in, is that linked?
Yes, it can be.
Yeah. So what do we mean by that? What does logistics
Thinking
mean?
of, I put up geography. It's Dinah speaking,
Yeah.
and
Hi,
what
Dinah.
I meant is particular to the example that Jason gave, where Scotland's a very big area and it's all right in kind of central belt where things are not so far apart, but in the remoter rural places, actually getting care at home can be quite tricky because it might take somebody 2 hours to get to someone. So which means they'll do three visits a day, and that'll be morning till night.
Okay, so is it really about understanding the people that we're trying to support rather than where they live, and then how they wish to be supported and what that looks like in partnership with their family and their community? Is that?
Yeah, well, it's partly that, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think
Well,
I think it's the does person-centered care mean the same to everyone is on the soft side, which kind of links to what I was thinking.
Okay.
Just have a read through some of the other ones. Hopefully you've started to spot now maybe that your post-it notes are in always come out in the same colour, and other people's depends on the colour of the suit they're wearing or their QUBEx wearing. So you can probably identify other people's. And if you click on the ones, it will tell you who said them. So if there's any that are not clear, or I'll try and move these a little way just to make a bit more space. But have a read through.
We're trying to capture some of the barriers that stops us from delivering personal-centered care to every person every time. And there are hard barriers and soft barriers. Any suggestions? Just include a post-it. Remember, bottom right-hand corner, the yellow rectangle, that's a post-it. You click and drag to the pad here. Or you just right-click and choose sticky steps.
Here we go.
Gaynor, you're quite sharp today, aren't you? Quite a few ideas. That's pretty good. That's cool. It seems like soft. Okay. It's like most of the challenges are soft barriers, aren't they?
Okay. I'll do this one.
Okay.
Can you see which one I'm pointing at?
Yeah. Ways for different departments. We can all see it.
Yeah. So that one for me is about the IT technology, about connecting everything that everybody does together. And I know that it's something that everyone's looking at, but I think it's fundamental to make sure that nothing's missed. And on the other side, I think I'll pick this one here. I think that was mine. Yeah. So the people that are actually receiving the care, I think if feedback, like the personal stories, that might affect how people deliver care. They see what the impact of that care was on people that were receiving it.
So that's just what we have about 30 seconds or so.
This is where I'm gleaning it from. But from the A&E for the paediatrics, because as you mentioned there, Jason, it's just the one unit that's been moved in there, and they've got a lot more, space and individual rooms, and it seems to be quite positive.
Yeah. So the adult ED is fantastic. I've got pals who work there who say it's way better than where they came from. There is a problem with some of the other. You're right about delayed discharges, and you're right about the compassion and the care that then follows from people like Barbara, who would be much better at home than in the hospital in the first place. So we're trying to stop them coming in as the main force. Don't make me talk about the Queen Elizabeth. That's what I do every day.
Is there an issue, I can only speak from my experience of the NHS in England, but is there an issue that people actually think they are delivering person-centred care when, as a patient, you actually don't feel that it is patient-centred?
Okay, so what I'm saying there.
And if you stick with me and we don't get kicked out, then I'm going to give you an example next of how we might get a little bit better at it. So I joined two of the groups, and they were interesting but very different. One was quite technical. I didn't speak in that group, but I was watching and listening to you, and one of those groups was quite technical about solutions, about how some of the limitations that a big system like the National Health Service in Scotland, certainly, some of the limitations that puts on our ability to be compassionate and caring. And then the other one was much more personal, much more about how we might fix that inside an individual hospital. So let me give you an example of how we've tried to apply what we've learned in patient safety, in attainment, in other places to this type of compassion. Because can you make care more compassionate? Some people believe that this is an intrinsic element, and there's nothing you can do to teach it. There's nothing you can do to systemize it. So we've tried a thing called the 5 must-dos with me. The 5 must-do with me. So these are 5 elements of care that we want to embed inside every transaction, every time somebody meets the system. Now, you might think it's a little too checklisty, and compassion and care don't lend themselves to it. But here's an example. So this is one of the 5 must-dos. and it's called What Matters to You. It's simply asking the patient, the family, the carer, what matters to them. So this is the story of a young 7-year-old young lady who is severely autistic. She's a real girl. She exists, and we have our family's permission to tell her story. She finds communication very difficult. Her dad is the only one who can understand her, and she struggles to speak. And unfortunately, she gets admitted to the Sick Children's Hospital in Glasgow for an acute illness, nothing related to her autism, but she gets admitted quite seriously unwell. And her dad, who's the only one who can communicate with her, has a heart attack in the children's hospital. So he has a cardiac event and gets admitted to the adult hospital. So Kendra is now by herself. She doesn't speak well, she doesn't communicate well, she can appear at first glance quite aggressive, quite difficult, and she is now alone, no family member. Fortunately, on arrival in the hospital, her and her dad had, on admission, as well as having blood pressure and heart rate and everything else done, they had met a nurse called Jen Rogers, who's now one of the senior nurses in this hospital. And she had heard us speak and seen our thing, and she had started to do What Matters to Me posters for kids. And these What Matters to Me posters are basically crayons and pens and a piece of paper, and when you arrive in the hospital you get to write what matters to you. So it turns out that Kendra has a slightly more personality than she seems. She can't say this out loud, but she's now telling you things in her poster that perhaps suggest to you that she's a little bit more feisty than you thought. This is a 3-person job. I'll make a run for it. Ha ha ha. I love cuddles to reassure me. I don't like medicine in my mouth. You get the idea. Slightly more to Kendra perhaps than you know, and one of the elements it says is that when she moves towards you then and she plays with your hair, that's her saying hello. So can you embed that what matters to me? Some of you will have come across Kate Granger perhaps, who's done a huge social media campaign around hello my name is. So the simple introduction of staff members, and we've got it on name badges now all over the place saying, hello, my name is Jason, I'm your surgeon today. So, method inside older people's care. She runs a very acute elderly care unit where there's a lot of dementia, a lot of cognitive impairment, a lot of very, very challenging people with very vulnerable families and older people. And she started to do What Matters to Me with them, and this is one tiny story of how she did that. She had a very elderly lady who was very confused, getting up overnight, moving around a lot, falling over because she was falling out of bed, didn't know where she was. And they had to put a full-time nurse with her the whole time, and these wards are not designed like that, so that has safety implications for the rest of the ward. So her niece was her only relative, and they brought her niece in and said, what matters to her? So they did a What Matters to Me poster, not with crayons and big posters, but with little circles and a designed version for this particular ward. And it turned out what mattered to this old lady was her rosary beads. And the infection control police kept putting the rosary beads in the drawer and hiding them away. So when they gave this old lady her rosary beads, 2 things happened. The first and obvious thing that happened was she calmed down. She stopped trying to get out of bed, she stopped falling over, she was relaxed. She was still confused and didn't fix her dementia, but she was in a much more familiar place and much, much safer and happier. But a second kind of magical thing happened, and that was that complete strangers stopped and spoke to her. People who would have ignored her, thought of her as a confused elderly old woman, stopped and sat beside her, because it said above her bed, what matters to me is my rosary. And people would sit beside her who had never met her and do her rosary with her. And then they would move on and somebody else would come. And there are now multiple stories of that kind of compassion and change. This is William's What Matters to Me poster from that same ward. He doesn't like sandwiches, he doesn't like rice, he likes sandwiches. He's waiting for his new teeth and his new shoes. So you already know something human about William that didn't exist before. So it doesn't say on this form, what matters to me is getting my antibiotics on time. It doesn't say, what matters to me is my chemotherapy dose. It says, I don't like rice. I like sandwiches. I'm waiting for my new shoes. And sometimes these say, I want to see my grandchildren. I'd like my favourite daily paper. I'd like to be left alone. Turns out that William likes plenty of attention. This one is all about how important their cat is. This person even brings in visual aids to teach them how to do it. So my premise is that you can take compassion and care and apply the same methods that we've applied to more technical elements of care inside that work. And that's the thing about our person-centered care work. I could give you multiple examples of the 5 must-dos. The 5 must-dos are not just what matters to me. They're also about patient and family involvement in the decision-making. They're about who matters to you. So they're about abolishing visiting times so that we are the visitors in the patient's lives, not the families, etc., etc., etc. So my fundamental premise is that person-centered care is the same as safety and efficiency and equity, and you can apply technical solutions in part to trying to fix that. Thank you for listening.
Hey. Move on. Woo. Thank you. Okay, let me come and stand where Jason is. Jason's done such a fabulous job. I'm now going to try and do the other side of it. He's done the human part of it, and I'm going to try and do the digital part of it. If that works for you. And so I was sort of trying to work out where best to start with this particular question about big data. There's a post which I came across recently about what big data was, which somebody added to a presentation which I was talking about. And I looked at the quote, and it's just coming through in your group chat, and I thought that's exactly it. What happens is every few years, the big consultancies find something which they want to try and sell to us, and they come along and frighten us with big data. But I want to try and break it all down in about 5 minutes and show you how we can use the information we have around us to try to make sure that we can actually provide the levels of care which have been described by Jason. So that's my plan. I also want to give you 1 or 2 more, we call them performance enhancement tools, like the barriers thing which you did, which will allow you to go and work with your colleagues or come back on Cube and work with your colleagues together to make it work for you. First story, when I started Penn School 25 years ago, at the end of my first year, I had a meeting with my accountant. I got so grown up. And so what happened was we went into this meeting to look at the annual report. And he brought out all this documentation and he talked me all through it. And I was really disappointed. Because you see, I didn't realize that everything he was going to do in the accounting process was about looking at the past. All he did was he told me what we'd done the year before, and he told me how we'd done it and how that happened. But what I really needed to know was what was going to happen in the future and how I might make that happen. And unfortunately, none of that happened in that meeting. Now, there's a reason I'm telling you that, because in a world which is changing really fast, it's really crucial for all of us to understand what's happening around us and what we need to do about it and how we can go about making those first steps which Jason talked about. So how does this link to big data? You see, there's a real headache because data itself is a bit of a con. People talk about data, but I'll tell you a story. I once did a conference for information professionals and I went on the stage. And when I went on the stage, I said, I shouldn't be here, guys, because I think I'm a bit of a fraud. And they said, there was sort of a buzz in the audience. And I said, I think I'm really a fraud because I don't know what information is. And they said, I said, put your hands up if I say 42, is that information? Some of the hands went up. Not all the hands. So I know they don't know what information is. So I said, what's missing? Somebody said, 42 what? So I said, 42 old. Years old, okay? Put your hands up. The hands which were up went down. Others swapped around. So now I knew that they didn't know what information was. And I said, what's missing? And somebody said, what's 42 years old? I said, perfect. You ask a question, we add to it some data, and from that we get information. And the information then tells us what to do and how to do it. So this is the big challenge for us. Data actually is of no use to us at all, let alone big data. The thing we've got to focus on is what questions do we need to be asking in order to be able to work out exactly what to do. You saw from Jason's what's important to me. It was the question which drove everything. So the formula we tend to use is we say, if you want to reduce your workload and make your organization work better and your patients work better, have a look at how you're spending your time. Most people in organizations spend most of their time reporting on what's happened in the past. Lots and lots of reports about what's happened and so on. The reports usually don't answer any questions, not easily. What you do instead, if you want to be more effective, is you focus on what are the questions I want to ask about the future in terms of what should I do next, and what are the questions I want to ask about how I should do things differently in the future. And we have one of the tools we use, and I'm not going to have enough time to sort of take you through it, but I will sort of introduce you to it, called Reportage, which allows us to do as a brainstorm, what are the really crucial questions we must ask? So that for me is where you start. And if you discover that your current reporting, management, and meetings do not answer those questions, stop doing them. You'll find your life gets much, much better. So that's the first part of the story I wanted to tell you. The second part is to move into this idea of big data, assuming, of course, that there is such a thing. Actually, I have to let you in on a little bit of a secret. For most of us, almost all data is big. One of the companies I worked with is a telecoms company, and they explained to me something which really shocked me. Apparently, right now, when I'm talking and I'm trying to present to you, by talking and using pictures, I'm transferring data to you at between sort of 1 and 100 megabits per second. That's how many words and ideas are going on. Apparently, if you're in an organization, what you discover is because most meetings are sequential, people don't write sticky notes and put them all up at the same time. One person talks, then the next person, then we ask for clarification. What that means is that the speed with which you can get information to the decision makers is limited at about 10 megabits per second. Why am I telling you this? Because it's a definition of big data. Big data is basically when you produce data, ways of trying to make sure that the data is processed. What I'm trying to explain is, for most organizations, having any answers at all, any information is big data. But the big data allows us to do something else. It allows us to look at huge data sets, but analyze them in a different way. So no longer are we stuck because we can't actually process all the data. We can do something else with it. You see, traditionally, the route we've used is to say, okay, let's figure out what data we need from the questions. We put them together, and we try and make them turn into something. This little diagram says, you can see it says questions on one side, and it says data on the other side, and you put them together, you get your information. The information gives you intelligence, so you go, what else should I be asking about for next year? And then from there, you can build an intuition, and if you've got a day-to-day way of working, it gives you more questions. How else could we help the children? What other things should we ask about what's important to you? But the challenge we have now is that there's too much of it. And so there's a whole new area which has arisen where people try and use mathematics to crunch through the data to give you new intelligence. And that's what big data is about. I'll let you in on the most important message from this session. Keeping the data means you have to guess how the data should be analyzed. So what happens is people come to you and they say, we'll take all your data and we'll give you insights. It might work, but it's really important that you make sure they explain exactly how they're going to do that insight generation. Otherwise, you will get information which actually isn't correct. And I'll just go back to my earlier joke about 42 years old. How old are you, Eddie? 42 years old. The thing is, I'm not 42 years old. So although it's information, it's actually completely the wrong information. And so the net result of that is you have to be very, very careful. I've got another diagram, and I will just put it up there. It's got a lot of stuff on there, but what I've tried to do is update the challenges we have for the sort of 21st century, and I'll put this up here and just walk you through it, and I'll point so you can see where I'm leading, and that might help a little bit. So what happens is, in the old days, we would just worry about the very, very simple idea that we'd have to work out what questions, and then we'd work our way from there to the data. But what happens now is, it's not enough just to have the questions and the data. We can get big data sets, try to work them through. Those give us new questions. We put the questions together with the big data sets. From that, we get our information, which allows us to be able to understand both things which help us operate better and also give us some insight and intuition to the future. I want to stop there and just see whether there are any questions coming through for me at that point. And if there aren't, then I'll give you, quote, your homework to take away and do. There are no questions coming through, so I'll give you the takeaways from this session. Step 1, most crucially important. Please, when you go back to work, have a look at the next meeting you go to. As you go into the meeting, ask yourself and make a list, what are the questions that this meeting has to answer for me? So start with that. And then next to that, write out what data do I need to collect to make sure that this information is going to be, this meeting is going to be useful to me. And if you go into the meeting and as you go through the meeting, you tick off the answers to the questions you took into the meeting, life will be good. If you go into the meeting and you come out of the meeting and in the meeting absolutely nothing which you were hoping to answer has been answered, find nice ways of not going to that meeting again. So that's my first big takeaway. Second big takeaway, don't let anyone hype you about big data. It's very, very simple. And if they're trying to hype you, please ask them how they're doing their analysis to work out their questions. If you do that, you'll always be a step ahead of them because then they'll have to explain it and then you'll understand. If you don't, it'll look like magic and you'll have to follow their recommendations even though you don't understand them. So those are my two big takeaways. I'm going to stop at that point because I think our time is a little bit tight. Tam?
Okay, thank you. Eddie, big round of applause for Eddie.
Bravo.
Brilliant. Thank you. Just before we move up to the room again, any final questions for Jason at all? Anyone? You can type them in or shout them out for your mics off, switch.
Oh yeah, the question is the very first part of any meaningful data structure. It's not witchcraft. Thank you. Absolutely. That you said it. I took longer. I could have just said that. If there aren't any other questions, should we look and just check whether we've actually achieved? Yeah. Oh, there's a lovely nice one here. Let's abandon meeting agendas. Oh yes, please. If you think about how we run this session, we've used your hopes and fears to try and influence and inform what we've done. So Jason and I had prepared sessions, but because we knew what you wanted from your hopes and fears, we actually managed to try and answer your questions a little bit better. And we shall prove that when we go back to the small demo whiteboard, where you're all going to have to go on your own because you're all experts at Cube now. Nobody's going to drag you. So if you click on the Play Small Demo Whiteboard, we can have a look at the hopes and fears, and maybe we'll discover something about how much time and environmental improvements we've made during the session. So just click on the place called Small Demo.
Welcome back, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
I keep just looking at what we were talking about today. We wanted to talk about learning to use a new tool, and I think a lot of people have found a way of using a new tool. Can I hear some? I can hear some yeses.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
shake your head, shout yes.
Or nods.
Don't
I
shout.
can't. Unfortunately, I haven't got eyes in the back of my head like Eddie, so I can't see that way. Did you feel that you actually engaged in meeting people today? Did you actually feel that people you'd never met, you've actually interacted with in a way that you would have if you'd met them at a conference or something?
Yes, it's a really useful exercise.
Now, what we heard from Jason was fantastic in terms of the idea of person-centered care. I think if we look at that and how we get that communication over, I know teams working together on the shop floor, in the wards and out in the community is actually the way to go. And one of the things that Tam's been doing is actually building teams on Cube that can work together and actually progress and share stories. And sharing stories is so powerful, especially when you're dealing with the patients and their carers. I mean, it speaks volumes to people when you tell the story we just heard today. And you'll be back in your office in 2 minutes or 3 minutes' time, having been away for a conference. And I have a colleague of mine today, sat in Inverness, who's probably not going to get home because of Abigail's storm. And he's been there for 2 days speaking to a small group of people rather than being in this meeting, which is unfortunate. Eddie, did you want to say something?
On that basis, yes, just a nice link there. We asked you where you were, and you put it on the map for us, and we've been calculating how far we would have had to have traveled. Josh, can you sort of summarize that for us? Is it possible? Okay. I should have calculated for us how far we've traveled. So if you look, turn ever so slightly to your right. It's just a spreadsheet running in the background, and we've used it to work backwards from where everyone is, the actual distance we're going to be traveling. So we've traveled something like 7,400 miles. Yeah, 7,400 miles. If we'd had to, if we'd spent our time, instead of actually just meeting virtually, if instead we decided that we were going to drive, it would have taken each of us, I think it says 4.25 hours, because I think we've got people from Brazil as well as other sides of the world, as well, so that sort of pushes the averages up a little bit. And at the same time as doing that, we have managed to save ourselves trees. And who can guess how many trees we saved just by doing this? Who can guess how many trees we saved? Any
3.
ideas? 3? No, more than 3. Go more than 3.
107.
20.
No, more than 20.
A forest.
We saved a small forest. Yeah. So anyway, we saved ourselves something like 30 trees, and we could have heated a house, so I think 3 houses for about a year, something like that. So we've made a huge difference just in this small session. I put us in a circle just so that we can wrap up together. I'm going to pass back to David Lomas, who kicked us off, who's probably going to ask Tammy for the next steps and then close.
Yeah, Tammy, before we close, if you got any wise words, and then we've got some questions for you right at the end. Tammy, did you want to say anything before we close?
No, we have another event hopefully in December where we're just going to get together and do a bit of networking around innovation and open innovation. It'd be really good if you could look at the partner stands. They've put quite a bit of effort into their stands. They've partnered today and also are really involved in the open innovation. So if you get a chance at the end to go and look there and speak to them, that would be really good. Any questions on QUBE and the NHS, just ping me an email and I'll get back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Eddie, to our speakers. There's lots more. I wanted to thank you for your participation and your contribution. We've got all the ideas that were captured in the breakout sessions. Leo is throwing up on the screen now some questions. It'd be really, really useful if you could just give us your answers to those questions. I know some people may have to leave. We've just hit 11 o'clock. But please do answer those before you leave, and that will give us some great feedback. And we hope to see you all again soon at the next QUBEx event. So thank you for coming. A big round of applause for everyone for all your help. Cheers, guys.
I wouldn't say I was sceptical, but after the initial couple of sessions, I was really quite hooked on it, and it's made it a lot, get speedy decisions and outcomes and action-focused things out your meeting, which is great. There seems to be much more whiteboards, etc., rather than trying to find a corner, in the real world.
I didn't find it difficult. I didn't find it complicated.
Somebody tie Eddie to a chair quickly.
Yeah, just live dangerously, why don't you?